My husband's family lined the back row of the courtroom, whispering, smirking, and checking their watches like they were waiting for a show to start. When I walked in alone, without a lawyer, my mother-in-law didn't even try to hide her laugh. To them, I was just a naive girl they had successfully stripped of everything: my home, my dignity, and my future. My husband, Julian, sat at the defense table, looking smugly at his high-priced legal team. They thought they had backed me into a corner, forcing me into a swift divorce that would leave me penniless and broken. The judge knocked his gavel and asked if I understood the terms of the settlement. I looked back at the smirking faces of the people who had tried to destroy me. I smiled, stepped up to the microphone, and said, "I understand them perfectly, Your Honor. Which is why I brought these. My name is Clara. I am 32 years old, and until 3 months ago, I believed that love could survive anything. For 5 years, I was married to Julian Vance. When we met, I was a graphic designer with a modest savings account and a deep belief in building a life through shared effort. Julian was the golden boy of the prominent Vance family, heirs to a sprawling commercial real estate empire in the Pacific Northwest. In the beginning, his family's immense wealth felt like a distant background detail. Julian was charming, attentive, and swore that my independent spirit was exactly what his structured world was missing. But matching drapes and expensive vacations cannot hide a foundation built on absolute control. The shift was subtle at first: an icy look from my mother-in-law, Eleanor, at Thanksgiving dinners, or critical remarks from Julian's brothers about my background. Then, Julian's father passed away, and Julian inherited a major stake in the family business. Overnight, the man I loved vanished. He became obsessed with status, family legacy, and the creeping paranoia that I somehow didn't belong in his tax bracket. The warmth in our home evaporated, replaced by a calculating, boardroom coldness. The final blow landed on a Tuesday morning. I came home from a grocery run to find a sleek, black briefcase sitting on our kitchen island. Next to it stood a man in a perfectly tailored suit, Julian's corporate attorney. Julian wouldn't even look me in the eye as his lawyer handed me a thick packet of papers. It was a divorce petition, coupled with an immediate eviction notice from the estate. Julian's family had decided I was a liability to their corporate restructuring. I was told I had 24 hours to pack my clothes and leave the life we had built together, with nothing but the shoes on my feet. The isolation that followed was a cold, suffocating weight. Within 48 hours of receiving those papers, Julian's family unleashed a coordinated campaign of absolute cruelty designed to break my spirit. I sat on the edge of a twin bed in a cramped, drafty rented room on the edge of the city, staring at my phone. The screen flickered with automated alerts from my banking app. One by one, my access to our joint accounts was severed. The credit cards I used for basic necessities were declined. When I tried to return to the house to retrieve my grandmother's vintage sewing machine and my design portfolios, I found the wrought iron gates locked. A security guard standing at the driveway informed me that Julian's mother, Eleanor, had given strict orders to treat me as a trespasser. They were systematically erasing my existence from their world. Every morning, a new, aggressive certified letter would arrive from their high-priced legal team, filled with dense, intimidating language meant to terrify me into submission. They demanded a swift, uncontested divorce, offering a meager settlement that wouldn't even cover 6 months of rent in this city. They wanted me gone, quiet, and entirely broken so Julian could protect the corporate restructuring his family valued more than human lives. Sitting alone in that quiet room, listening to the rain beat against the glass, the harsh reality finally sank in. The people I had shared holiday meals with, the family I had cared for when Julian's father was sick, were actively plotting my total financial and emotional ruin. They looked at my silence and assumed I was paralyzed by fear. They believed that by stripping away my resources, they had stripped away my power. What they failed to realize was that when you take everything from a person, you also take away their fear of fighting back. As I sat on that cold floor, surrounded by the few cardboard boxes I had managed to scrape together, I realized that my story wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about exposing a truth that had been hidden in the shadows for far too long. I knew that Julian and his family expected me to fold under the pressure, to disappear quietly into the night like a ghost of their past. But looking at the scattered documents before me, a sudden wave of clarity washed over my grief. I am sharing this journey with you now because no one should ever be made to feel small or powerless by people who use wealth as a weapon. Before I tell you about the shocking discovery that changed the entire trajectory of this battle, I want to take a moment to look out at everyone standing with me through the screen. Please, take a second to comment the city or country you are watching from right now. I want to see how far this story of resilience has reached, and to remind myself that even when we feel entirely alone, we are part of a massive, unbreakable global community. Now look closely at what happened next. The following morning, I drove out to a dusty, industrial storage facility on the outskirts of town, where the movers had dumped the remaining boxes of my personal belongings. The air inside the metal unit was stale, smelling of cardboard and forgotten memories. I began opening the taped boxes, searching for my old design journals, desperately trying to find a piece of the independent woman I used to be before the Vance family tried to hollow me out. Near the very back of the unit, tucked beneath a stack of heavy winter coats, my hand brushed against something rigid. It was Julian's old corporate lockbox, an outdated leather trunk he had brought home from his father's office a year ago and completely forgotten about. The lock was flimsy, and with a firm twist of a screwdriver, the latch gave way. Inside lay a collection of dust-covered physical financial ledgers spanning the last 4 years, alongside a sleek, encrypted silver flash drive labeled simply as Vance Holdings, Contingency. My heart hammered against my ribs as I slotted the drive into my laptop. Because I had managed the basic digital archiving for Julian's independent consulting branch early in our marriage, I still remembered his standard encryption protocols. The drive blinked, opened, and revealed a reality that made my blood turn to ice. It wasn't just a ledger, it was a dual accounting system. Julian and his brothers had been systematically falsifying their commercial property valuations to evade millions in state and federal corporate taxes. But the true shock came when I opened a folder labeled under my own maiden name. Julian had quietly established a hidden shell company, completely forged my signature on the incorporation documents, and used my identity to funnel over $3 million in offshore assets to shield them from his own corporate business partners. They hadn't just discarded me because I didn't fit their status. They were rushing this divorce because if I discovered my name was tied to their fraudulent empire, the entire Vance dynasty would crumble. The natural instinct for anyone in my position would have been to instantly hire the most expensive, aggressive divorce lawyer in the state and spark a massive, public courtroom brawl. But as I stared at the glowing screen of my laptop in that dim storage unit, I remembered something Julian's father used to say: "A loud enemy is easy to predict, but a quiet one is deadly." If I came at the Vance family with a traditional legal attack, their army of corporate attorneys would immediately tie me up in litigation for years, draining what little money I had left until I was forced to settle on their terms. Instead, I took the silver flash drive and walked straight into the office of a senior federal forensic accountant, a man who spent his entire career untangling the complex web of white-collar crime. For 3 days, we sat in his quiet office, matching the digital ledger entries with public corporate tax filings. The evidence was absolute, terrifying, and completely irrefutable. But the true stroke of genius came when the accountant reviewed the standard settlement agreement Julian's family was trying to force me to sign. In their desperate arrogance, their legal team had drafted a sweeping, ironclad corporate indemnification clause. It stated that upon the dissolution of the marriage, I would forfeit all claims to any joint, separate, or hidden family business entities, while Julian would assume absolute, sole ownership and legal responsibility for all existing corporate accounts associated with his name or branches. They thought they were protecting their precious empire from a greedy outsider. What they didn't realize was that they had built their own trap. By signing that paper, I wasn't walking away empty-handed. I was transferring full, unmitigated liability for millions of dollars in undetected, fraudulent assets directly to Julian, right before the trap snapped shut. The heavy oak doors of courtroom clicked shut behind me, the sound echoing through the sterile room. As I walked down the center aisle alone, without a lawyer by my side, I could hear the immediate shift in the gallery. Julian's family lined the back row like spectators at a theater. His mother, Eleanor, caught my eye and let out a soft, mocking laugh, leaning over to whisper something to Julian's brother. At the defense table, Julian sat flanked by three high-priced corporate attorneys, his posture radiating absolute triumph. They truly believed they had won. They thought they were looking at a terrified, broken woman who was about to surrender everything just to make the nightmare end. I took my place at the petitioner's podium. The judge adjusted his glasses, looked down at the thick stack of documents before him, and cleared his throat. Mrs. Vance, I see you are appearing pro-SE today. We have the final dissolution agreement drafted by the Respondents' Council. Do you understand that by signing this, you waive all future claims to the Vance estate, its corporate entities, and all associated assets? I understand perfectly, Your Honor, I said, my voice steady and clear through the microphone. I turned slightly, catching the smug smile spreading across Julian's face. I picked up the pen and firmly signed the settlement pages, officially releasing myself from their family empire. But as the bailiff stepped forward to take the signed papers, I reached into my briefcase. However, Your Honor, as required by the disclosure laws of this court, I must submit this certified forensic audit packet regarding the corporate accounts Julian is assuming sole legal liability for under Section 9 of this agreement. The judge frowned, taking the heavy manila folder. As he opened it and began scanning the top page, his eyes widened. He looked from the documents to Julian's legal team, his expression turning incredibly stern. Mr. Vance, your counsel needs to review this immediately. This court is receiving a certified notice of a federal asset freeze issued against your primary commercial branch exactly 1 hour ago. Julian's lead attorney practically snatched the paperwork from the bailiff. As his eyes flew down the page, tracing the dual ledger data and the federal fraud case number, the color drained completely from his face. He turned entirely pale, his hands visibly shaking as he leaned down and whispered the devastating news into Julian's ear. The smug smile vanished from my husband's face instantly, replaced by a look of pure, unadulterated terror. Eleanor leaned forward from the gallery, her eyes wide with sudden panic as she realized the empire they fought so ruthlessly to protect had just become their prison. The fallout was swift and absolute. Because Julian had eagerly signed the indemnification clause to shut me out, he assumed sole legal responsibility for the fraudulent shell accounts. Within a month, the federal asset freeze crippled the Vance empire, forcing them into a humiliating bankruptcy and a grueling corporate investigation. Julian and his brothers lost the very estate, status, and power they had sacrificed their humanity to protect. Meanwhile, I walked out of that courtroom entirely free. The $3 million hidden under my name was safely recovered, leaving me financially independent and ready to rebuild my life on my own terms. Today, I am designing again, living in a home filled with peace rather than control. Standing alone in that courtroom didn't break me. It showed me exactly who I am. Never let anyone make you feel small, because sometimes your quietest move is your greatest victory.